Hello, everybody. This is Kenny Cummins here of Chilling with Kenny C right here on tmvcafe.com, bringing you entertainment to your ears. This is one of the rare interviews that I do outside of the music realm. Joining me is a author and a professor out of Oklahoma State University. He's put together numerous books over the course of his career. Very thoughtful, educated brother. Um, and I'm very excited to be joined with him, Mr. Stephen Graves. He's with me right now. How's it going, man?
Good, brother. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Appreciate you, man. So, I want to start off with the book side, the
Yeah.
author side. So what got you into being an author? How did that came about for you?
Being an author and or having to publish books is half of the job. A lot of people think that being a professor is just about being in the classroom and teaching, and that's part of it. But the way that they break down our job responsibilities is that we have to have like some active research, active ideas that we're constantly working on and trying to publish and make them public and whatnot. And so, but even as when I was a undergraduate student, I've always had like notebooks of ideas that I've always kind of just kept. So I just have notebooks full of just theories and ideas that I've just come up with. Being a predominantly black student in a predominantly white area. Now, I didn't always raise my hand and share my ideas around white people because I think they'd be gladly accepted. So I always kept little notepads full of these, ideas and stuff that I had. And then I just knew that whenever I got a chance to actually publish those and share those myself, that I would do so. And so now, on the professor side of things, I want to give a shout out to Howard University, where I got my PhD. They definitely prepared me for the process, but introduced a lot of great ideas to the work that I was already doing as it concerned blackness and black identity and whatnot. And so I just kind of put those ideas together. And when I got the freedom to actually just express myself, as best as I can, as freely as possible, because there still is a review process and they still do try to check your work for some ideas and things like that. And I tend to get a little bit of pushback on some of the things that I do right, but for the most part, you do get to kind of publish your own original ideas. And I just had a bunch of them, again, just from life experience, just from my interactions and, in college and in classrooms and in life. And so I just knew that, again, as part of my job and part of my career, but also just, going through college, one of the favorite things to do was just the books that we read that were like 100 years old. And I was like, damn, if I ever get a chance to write a book that, even after I'm dead and gone, that people still, feel is an important, piece of knowledge and history. That'd be great. That might be, one way that we're able to live forever by having knowledge and books that last a long time. And we're still reading books from thousands of years ago. And I was just like, man, if I can get it on that, I got to have some really good ideas. But if I get the opportunity to put something out that'll last that long, I mean, I'll count myself a winner, right? By that alone. So it's part of what we do, but it's also a part of like, trying to contribute some original ideas and different ideas, than what's mainly heard, mainstream politics, mainstream culture. We talk about, music and we talk about sports and we talk about, just movies and black culture all together. And so all the different kind of ideas and things that I can put together and in that kind of, try to enlighten some, against the status quo, I feel is important. And so it's always been a great little outlet, and it's a different kind of crowd, but I try to mix it in between academics and the common world. And so it really works out nice.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So my dad, he's an author himself. He's done some books, and I've always check out the process of putting together a book. And man, I knew it was a lot of work. I knew it was just the ideas that you have to come up with and things like that. But man, I didn't realize I knew it was work, but I didn't know it was really, really work. Like just everything that the chapters and how
Yeah.
to figure out which goes where and
Yeah.
things of that nature. Like, man, it's very overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it must be very satisfying once it's completed and it's out for the public to see whether it's your students or whether it's your colleagues or family and friends and loved ones and get to see your work, your body of work. put out
Yeah,
to the public.
it takes a long time too, and that's the thing. I mean, sometimes you can finish the actual writing process, and it could still be a year before it actually comes out. And so, you like you said, you can be telling people, "Hey, I got, just finished this book's coming out," and then it starts going through that process. They send it back to you, and with some questions, I want you to brush this up, and you send it back. I've had reviewers who's like, "Oh, I need you to take this part out. I don't think that's acceptable." I don't think people are going to like that part, and sometimes I take it out. Sometimes I'm like, no, that's an important part. I wrote it this way. I meant it to be that way, and I want it to be published that way. I'm not taking it out. It's just too bad, and things like that. So it's definitely a process. And yeah, when you start to see those your words on print, and you see those books come out, well, and you get your first couple of ones that they send to you. Yeah, it's definitely a really a nice sight to see, and it's definitely rewarding for sure. And then you get, being an author is a lot like music. I compare, being a professor a lot to the music industry. It really, in regards to publishing and as far as like being an artist, there's like levels for these things, like, we publish book chapters and we publish, just little journal articles or like little 25-page little snippets, A lot of times those are like singles in the music industry, It's just like it's especially with in your job, your employer is like a record label, they want to see something, what I'm saying? You got to be putting something out. So even if you give them a little teaser, a little article that comes out, and he's like, okay, this guy, they're looking for something else. Like, okay, well, when's the big one? And books are like albums. It's like you're setting them up sometimes with journal articles, but before too long, that employer is going, "Where's the book? Where's the book? Where's the book?"
Yeah,
And it's like, and so you're trying to get those things out, and those become the way that we end up making it. But yeah, it's great to see. But I'm sure it's very similar to the music industry, and you're playing these song stuff for your friends, and you tell them that you got a single coming out with so and so, and they're waiting to hear it, and they're waiting to hear it. And I'm like, I'm telling you, what's coming. That's the way. They promised me it's gonna be, it's gonna come out, and so when it finally does, yeah, it's very rewarding, and we get a little time to kind of bask in it a little bit, but then we get right back to it and try to get that another one.
yeah, absolutely, man. So like books and music, it does go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Now as a song, especially on the hip hop side of things, people we word for word go to the Genius website, and
Hmm.
sometimes people can take certain words or a line out of context.
Yep.
It's the same can apply for a book, or whether you read it, the physical copy or you reading the online version.
Mhm.
From your perspective, like how do you respond to people that takes a certain a book or a chapter or even a sentence out of context? How do you respond to those reviewers or just anyone that respond to things that you said?
I usually tell them to look at the entire body of work. I don't think that anybody in this field, especially when we talk about higher education, I mean, we're not really generally out to offend or be big splash artists. That's for like, news people and stuff like that who write these books that are meant to like trigger people and meant to like cause all this kind of ruckus. And when you talk about higher education, the public and the publication process, we're mostly trying to inform. And inflammatory stuff doesn't necessarily get us anywhere. It's in higher ed, and purposely trying to piss people off. That doesn't really do us any good in higher ed. That's a different set of kind of publication. So when I put stuff in there or people come across things in my work that they feel is controversial or they feel like it's going to trigger some people else it is, I always advocate that they try to read around it. Make sure you always read the paragraph before and read the paragraph after. So they try to give you some context, most it is, right? And then, if you have any questions or you feel like something, is being, misunderstood and misinterpreted, always shoot me an email or reach out, most of this, so I can kind of clarify. And I've had to do this a couple of times. And I can try to make it more clear. I've even had to put disclaimers in a book, about some of the, the language, some of the
Yeah,
topics and stuff like that was going to be in there kind of as a warning to readers and whatnot. And I was kind of even against that, but I had to concede something in order for it to be left in the book and whatnot, which was important for me. Again, that, part's important. But I always tell them that we're educators. We're not out here to offend people. We're not shock jock. We don't do anything like that. We're not on Fox or any kind of, news outlet trying to, trigger people with controversial takes in order for them to get to read the books. We're here to inform and have good information and whatnot. And so everything that I write, most of this, or everything that that people read that have my name on it, is always something that I firmly believe in and something that I, have either experienced or something that I have done or I've researched real this that I think should be done. And so I'm not out here just poking people for no reason. And so I just always advocate real this for people who, again, who have gone through my work and have found some things that they want to push back on. That one, you can always reach out. We're public people here. But two, real is again, make sure that you're getting it in context and making sure that you're reading before and you're reading after. You're not just kind of, picking out sentences, or else it is out of nowhere, because there's usually some context that's educational aspect of it. We're educators first and foremost. So anything that's controversial is meant to educate. And I try to, have people keep that in mind.
Yeah, well said, man. Especially it feels like with music, people just gonna see what is said and just ran with it. I
Yeah.
feel like in a book, like you can really read it through, like read the whole chapter or
Mhm.
read the whole paragraph, maybe the paragraph beforehand, just to get an understanding. And yeah, reading is fundamental, folks. I mean, I know we living in different times, but it's still a
Yeah.
thing. You
Yeah.
know, I read from time to
Mhm.
time. I'm getting into Kindle a little
Yeah.
bit, so and on my spare time. So that's very, very important. But hey, at the end of the day, man, you've been an educator, you've been a teacher, you've been doing what you do. Just makes people think.
Yeah.
In music, it makes people think, it makes people put into perspective,
Mhm.
whether it's someone your experience or somebody else's experience.
Mhm.
And I feel like with a book, it really, when people dive deep into it, and really, really think to really read through, get a good understanding from the author's perspective.
Yeah.
So it was reading was something that I definitely enjoyed as a child, grew up, step away from it for a while, then I got back to it. But it's definitely something that still do,
Yeah.
even regardless of your schedule.
Mhm.
So yeah, I appreciate the work that you put in, especially with your platforms and everything. And we in the school year, obviously,
Yeah.
back to school,
Yeah.
people, well, how's that feeling for you, man? With the school year, how you feeling so
Oh,
far?
man, well, the one thing about the job is that you get a new influx of students every semester, so it's just like there's always new faces, new ideas. Even if you're teaching, class that we taught before, there's always new ways of going about it. The students come from all different kind of areas and backgrounds and, have their own kind of histories and explanations. I teach a lot of black students as obviously, in my classes, I teach, again, black popular culture and the Center for Africana Studies, in addition to political science. I teach black political thought and black politics. So I got a lot of black students. And so, it's always different and it's always interesting, interacting with them as they come back. We have a lot of students who have, family issues and a lot of, constraints that kind of, bind their time. And, a lot of the black students, they just really want to be heard. A lot of black students come from predominantly white schools and places like that where they've never had a voice and like, they've never been heard before. And so, part of, when you walk into a new school year and a new semester, it's trying to, condition them that this is different. I'm saying you're now in college now. You're an adult. There's a little bit more freedom here, but also, you're open to kind of, explain yourself and tell people what you think and actually be heard instead of just kind of, sit down and take a test and sit down and just do this. There's not much of a back and forth. And so that part of it is always an interesting part of a new semester when you have new students coming in. It's also an election year coming up, man. And so, with classes starting or us being a month away from the election, times are rough. I'm sure you can see it out here. The rhetoric is crazy. The vibe and the atmosphere is real polarizing. Everything is real tense. People are talking real slick and reckless these days in the streets and whatnot like that. And these kids can see that too as well. And so that always makes it different when the kind of emotional and, drive is real high. The emotions are running real kind of high right now. Everything is tense these days with the election coming up. Some people are treading real lightly on their thoughts and belief systems right now and trying to feel
Yeah,
people out. And so, Now that makes it a little bit different than it normally would. I'm thinking that, by the time we roll around next semester and the election's over with, it should be a little bit different depending on who wins. But for the most part, stepping into a new semester with an election year and everybody, being real tense, students are filling out other students, who's the Trump supporters, who's not, and what's triggering what. And so this semester's definitely been a little bit interesting, but I absolutely love it because again, college campuses really have a vibe to them, man. Like there's so much youth and energy on, on a college campus. Everyone's there to, learning. So the academic side, the intellectual side is always buzzing a little bit. And they, and college kids keep you young. They always introducing me to new things and new ideas and songs and music artists I've never heard of. I try to, introduce them to some of my old school 90s hip hop and R&B that I'm a big fan of, that I grew up on, that they never seem to understand. I have a lot of good 90s reference jokes that they just always seem to miss. I got some good old fashioned Fresh Prince jokes they never understand. I told a joke in my Black popular culture class last week about Boys and Men, ABC, BBD, the whole East Coast family, and not one of them cracked a smile or nothing. Like they had no idea what the hell I was talking about. And so it's interesting, but again, but it's a vibe, and again, the back and forth really kind of keeps me going, and it keeps you young and whatnot. And so, I couldn't really imagine myself doing anything else outside of kind of what I'm doing right now. And so, with the new semester coming in, just new students, and it's a great little energy, man. It's good energy, and I try to pride myself on surrounding myself around positive energy, positive vibes, and just kind of youthfulness, man, to kind of keep me going.
Yeah, I appreciate the 90s references, man, because it feels like people kind of forget
Oh,
about the 90s and what it meant to so many of us,
absolutely.
and the 90s hit different. I would argue with anybody that nobody had it like the 90s did.
Yep.
The music, the TV shows,
Yeah.
the fashion,
Yeah. The
uh, the
movies.
movies, the stars that we had that it was at
Yeah.
their peak.
Yep.
It doesn't get any better than the
The
90s.
lifestyle, I mean, in the 90s was right before technology went crazy. We were right on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
brink. So you still had to have a little game. You still, you were still out in public. People weren't, people still played outside. You still had to have a little bit of swag. You still had to approach people, and you
yeah,
still had to like court in a public kind of setting. There was no online dating or nothing like that. So if you was really kind of feeling somebody, you had to have a presence, and you had to have a little physical swag and everything else. This back in the 90s, like that was the last kind of era or generation of where you really had to be able to step out in public, like face to face. There was no technological boom, till then, and so you still had to have, that being out was still a thing, you know what I'm saying? And so you bet, I don't think any generation has had it as good as those of us who grew up in the 90s.
yeah. I was born in the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
raised in the 90s.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, I use an NBA analogy. Like NBA back then, physical,
Yeah.
hard nose. There were no TikTok stars or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just you either can ball or you can't. You just
Right.
have, and you gotta deal with the punches that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
And today it's like ticky tack fouls.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, let them play, man.
Yep.
Like, let's just let's see some passion or
Yeah.
something. So
It's like that in football and a lot of sports too. I think it's kind of like that with music too, really. I think,
yeah,
in the 90s and again in our generation, again, I mean, winning was kind of like the thing. Like it wasn't so much about looking flashy and stats and everything else. There's like we liked winners, Tiger Woods, Michael
yeah,
Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, people like that who were winning and stuff like that. And I think what happened over time is like winning got so much more difficult that it seemed to come out of the grasp of like this newer generation. And so just like being trendy and cool took, kind of took the replacement of like being a winner and stuff like that. So like now you hear kids talk a lot about, like John Morant and Zion Williams and people like that. It's like, yeah, those are pretty good basketball players like that, but but like, you can't call them great. They don't win anything. And the kids always
yeah,
say, oh, it's not about winning. But it's just like, they couldn't do that back in the 90s. And like, they could do that in the 90s if they wanted to. They're like,
yeah,
you trying to tell me Clyde Drexler couldn't dunk like that? Like, what are we talking about? They could do all those things back then. But you guys are just more interested in the look of things and the appeal and the flashiness, and not so much of, the actual like outcomes and like a winning type of a thing.
Yeah.
And so, I call it the new syndrome, like the new brother syndrome that's taking over, and I think it's kind of in music too. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, it's a hot beat and then, very little lyrical substance. And that's all that these kids care about. You know what I'm saying? They play it in class and it's just like, it's not so much about substance and depth and outcome roles anymore. It's just like a very short, sweet. Does it look good, sound good in the immediate moment? If so, I'm with it. If not, then I'm on to the next one. And so it's very, big difference sports wise too. Again, football, same kind of a thing. Basketball, I think same
Yeah.
way as the music too as well.
Yeah,
That's why I think the '90s generation gets a bad rap. I mean, I was having this conversation the other day about Tupac Shakur in the '90s, who was peak in the '90s. And I talked to new students and people about that, and all they can say is always he's so aggressive, and he's like always yelling. He seems like he's always yelling and screaming into the mic and real it is. I'm just like, those are popular songs. You got to go through the whole catalog, man. Like there are so many songs that Tupac songs, especially later on in his career, that are very philosophical, or he's calm and lyrical and everything else. It is like people take the gangster rap stuff a little too seriously when it's like, no, there's flow in there and lyricism in their stuff as well. And again, that's kind of losing its emphasis a little bit. But I have those, man. I live and breathe for the '90s, man. I keep trying to bring it back to my new students as much as possible to kind of give them a little taste of what it was like back then.
I definitely wish I had a teacher like you because I didn't have any teachers that was like that. That was just generic type people that was just robotic or whatnot. It was like, man, how can I relate to you? How can I
Mhm.
relate to the things that you're talking about? You like a robotic to me.
Yeah.
Like, come on. And as it pertains to Tupac, he had all sorts of emotion. He wasn't just screaming and yelling. He had Dear Mama.
Yeah.
He had Brenda got a baby.
Right.
He had, How Do You Want It? You saw the
Hmm.
party side, California Love, obviously. We got all sides of him. And
You
then
bet.
just think if he was still alive, he definitely would have done more than just juice the movie. Like
Yeah.
he was a thought-provoking guy, but he made his point across. That's just what it boils down to.
He was a
Uh,
revolutionary man, and he was trying to uplift and empower. And that's another thing I always harken on, in my Black Public classes, my students too as well. I'm just like, man, where's the empowerment music at? Who's uplifting somebody? I mean, tell me what song you're listening to right now on your Spotify or whatever it is that is uplifting and empowering, whatnot. That is, that's speaking more, about the Black conditions and being better and doing things like that. Because, like you said, Brenda's got a baby and something like that. Keep your head up. You know what I'm saying? I think of songs like Blasphemy and Hold Your Head. I'm thinking about like even Queen Latifah, UNITY. I'm thinking about Self Destruction. I'm thinking of West Coast All Stars. I mean, I mean, there's so many songs
yes.
back then that were just like brothers, you know what I'm saying? Let's get our stuff together. Let's hold it up. We got to hold it down. We got to do better. We try to uplift the power of the community. And all these songs were hot songs that would go number one that you would like, that you would listen to in the car, that you would listen to at home. You would wait for the box or in BET to play these videos. Like these were like hot songs that you listen to that also were like empowering and uplifting and whatnot too, that got you like motivated and charged. And I keep asking my students, like, where are those songs today? Who's making uplifting songs? Who's rapping about their mom and their, or just their wife and familyhood and just the everyday struggles and man of just trying to be a Black man in this country? Who's doing that? And it's just none of that anymore. I know that everybody's rich and fancy now, and TikTok generation and wealth is much more extravagant these days. So maybe no one's struggling like they were back in the '90s. But damn, I still listen to and advocate for, again, a lot of '90s hip hop and R&B. And again, those songs, again, were top songs. They weren't just niche songs. You know what I'm saying? Those were like real street songs, roasted that had all your favorite artists in them, roasted is that would be prominent, that had empowering messages, and you don't hear those at all hardly anymore these days. I can't even remember the last one. I think my students said Kendrick Lamar's "All Right" is like the last song that they can kind of point to that's in that kind of uplifting, and powerful message. And again, on the female side, I don't know, man. I think Queen Latifah, I mean, UNITY, that's going to be a lost art, because I don't think any, and the female empowering side is gone or vanished for the time being. But again, those were those are mainstream hits, bruh, that were empowering and uplifting and spoke to Black condition. And I think that that's something that we need to get back to.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It is great to have a chat with you, Professor. Everybody go check him out. Check out his
Yes.
website. I think it's
Yeah.
gravyology.com.
Yep.
And get all his books, get his more
The
info
podcast is on there. Again, I got a
podcast.
blog on there. I
Yeah,
mean, the best access to most of the information about me, man, is on that website. You're absolutely correct. I appreciate you shouting that out. Gravyology.com. Absolutely.
yeah, gravyology.com for more info on Mr. Groves here. It was great to have this very thoughtful conversation, and I'm wishing you the best in everything, and well, for the remainder of the semester and school year, and everything else that you're working on. Thank you for your time, man, and it's great having this conversation with you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, Kenny. And again, anytime, man, shoot me a holler out. I always appreciate it, man. I enjoy your show. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, man. You have a good night.
You too, brother.
All right, peace. All right.